Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Against the Odds, a show where we believe that sharing information can inspire and also transform lives. My name is Njiben Zama, and today I'm going to be discussing prayer. More specifically, I'm going to be asking the question, as Africans, who do we pray to? Who do you pray to when you pray? But, before we get there, let me tell you how and why I got to asking that question. A few episodes ago, my guest, Serge Kamgan, mentioned how books changed his life. How he went from peanuts to pastures with the help of some self-help books. And one of them being The Purple Cow. I reflected on his presentation, and I wondered how many of us read, just for pleasure. But let me ask you more directly. When was the last time that you read a book just for pleasure? A month? 2? A year? One thing that the pandemic has done for me, is accord me some extra time. And I've used some of that time to read. And as I read, a lot of questions come up. Questions like, why is Africa a continent, that's so endowed with so much wealth and resources, human, food, minerals? Why is it that Africa, with all these resources, has 16 of the 20 poorest countries in the world? Questions like, why do we Africans pray the most, but we're the least prosperous? Questions like, does God discriminate? And so on and so forth. I'm going to be talking about these questions that I just raised, in subsequent episodes. But today, the question on my mind is, when you pray, as Africans, when you pray, who do you pray to? One of the books I read is titled Decolonizing the Mind by Ngugi Wa Thiongo. And I really think all Africans ought to read that book. In the very first page of the preface, he has a quote that, goes to, that I really think, captures the essence of the book and, his level of thinking. He says, writers are surgeons of the heart and souls of a community. He says, writers and surgeons have something in common: a passion for the truth, because a prescription of the correct cure is dependent on a rigorous analysis of the reality. In other words, a writer can, go within a community, he observes that community, and incisively detects what ails that community. And in some cases, they prescribe, cures for the ailments. For example, in Things Fall Apart, Chinua Achebe writes, he says, the white man is very clever. He came quietly with his religion. We were amused by his foolishness and allowed him to stay. Now he has won our brothers, and our clan can no longer act as one. He has put a knife on the things that held us together, and we have fallen apart. Achebe was able to discern his community's ailments. He was able to discern their reality. And as I read Decolonizing the Mind, I was made to understand that while the partitioning, of Africa was accomplished through the sword and the bullet, the chalk and the blackboard, preceded by religion, were the more efficient tools. The physical violence of the battlefield, was followed by the psychological violence of the classroom, which was more efficient and made the conquest permanent. So the classroom, a conduit that made it possible for the conquest to be permanent. Whereas the bullet, was the means of a physical subjugation, religion and language were the means of spiritual subjugation. So let me illustrate a little bit. Growing up, my grandma would tell me stories in Gemba language. That was my language. So my interactions within, the white and Gemba community was in Gemba. So there was harmony, in the language spoken between my home and the community. But school was different. School was a different matter altogether. All the lessons were taught in English. There were no books in Gemba. And I quite remember there were instances where I got into trouble, for speaking Gemba within the school premises. So the school was structured in such a way that English, or those who spoke English, were run at the top. And one had to pass the English language exam, to progress in life, period. You had to be good in English. So I grew up, with the understanding, understanding that my language, that Gemba, speaking Gemba was bad. And that speaking English or being good in English was good. I know at this point you're probably asking, how does this tie into the prayer, premise that I started with, the question. But before I answer that question, let me mention another thing that I read. It was an article. It was titled, it was an excerpt, from a private letter from King Leopold II of Belgium, to the colonial ministries, missionaries, to his ministries, who were sent to the Congo, in 1883 or something. In the article, it says, he was writing to his missionaries, instructing them. He says, your principal objective in our mission in the Congo is never to teach the savages about, it's not to teach the savages to know God, about God, or to know God. This they already know. He said they speak and submit to their gods, Mungu and Zambi, and He said they already know that to kill, to steal, to sleep with someone else's wife, to lie and to cheat. He says they already know that that is bad. He said, have courage to admit it. You are not going to teach them what they already know. And so as I read those words, they took me back to my childhood. And as I said earlier, I grew up with my grandmother. She was Presbyterian. She was a Presbyterian Christian. You know, also I thought. We went to church every Sunday. She got me involved or enrolled through catechism, baptism, and all that, you know. So I grew up a Presbyterian. But I also remember a shrine in my grandma's one-bedroom home. You know, in one corner, you know, it was marked by 3 stones. You know, in one corner, and on those stones was a clay pot. There was a traditionally carved wooden stool, you know, in front of the shrine. You know, there were some other ornaments on the wall and cowries on the floor. Each time there was a family issue within her family, she would invite her relatives, her brothers and sisters, aunts and uncles, and they would sit in a semicircle, you know, with her presiding. And, you know, she was a matriarch. After the meeting, she would squeeze, you know, some herbs in a calabash. We call it mundora, you know, back at home. And, you know, this water, squeeze it in water, and everybody would drink from that calabash. Everyone. After that, a rooster, a cock, you call it a rooster, you know, would be killed, and some of the blood spilled on the shrine, prepared, and cooked in that clay pot sitting on those 3 stones. And everyone who was available, who was around, would partake in eating that chicken. Everybody. I mean, that was great for me because, you know, and you know, I started praying that they have more issues so I could eat some chicken. You know, but what I noticed was before the eating, before the feast, everybody would gather around the shrine, and my grandma would offer a prayer. She would pour some libation on the shrine, on the ground, and pray. And, you know, invoke all her ancestors, you know, those who had gone before her. You know, I remember names like Ndifonkwan, Frumate, Tumatu, Disang. So what my grandmother was doing, what my grandmother did, you know, just confirmed King Leopold's message, which was that we had our own God. We had our own religion. You know, and, you know, had she been alive today, I would have loved to ask her, you know, why did she have to pray both to her ancestors and to the God of the missionaries? You know, I mean, Christianity, I remember, only came to my village around the 40s, 1940s or so. So I asked the question, you know, who did they pray to? Who did my grandmother pray to, you know, before Christianity came? You know, I would have asked her, because answering those questions would have, you know, answered a lot, would have solved a lot of questions that are, you know, that are cropping up as I dig deeper. You know, questions like, why is the Bible the only book that was translated in many African languages? You know, for example, Swahili, you know, Mongaka, you know, Tswana. Zulu, and many others. Why was the Bible the only book that was translated into these languages? But then we have zero scientific books that were printed in our languages. Why? Why are libraries full of university science books that are in Chinese, in Russian, French, Portuguese, you name it? The Chinese are taught mathematics in Chinese. The Japanese are taught engineering in Japanese. They're all taught finance, astrophysics, science, and all the subjects that underpin an economy, a society, in their own languages. The only book that was translated into so many African languages is the Bible. And often you would have, someone in African churches translating from English to the local language. And that will only be a scenario in a church. And I think there's something seriously wrong about that. That's what I think. So my brethren, when you pray, I'm going to ask a question. So when you pray, who do you pray to? You may be asking, what relevance does it have? Well, to me, it's a question that boils down to, who am I? Because all my life I've grown up a Presbyterian. I've been made to believe, through spiritual subjugation in someone else's religion, someone else's culture, and ultimately someone else's God. While negating my own God, my own religion, language, and culture. So, in essence, the question I'm asking is, has my life been a lie? Was my grandmother living a lie? And if so, why? So who do you pray to when you pray? Because the answer to that question will become a journey towards awareness. And that's something that we as Africans need to do. And I'll keep searching. But for now, I will side with my grandmother and pray to all ancestors, all of my ancestors, the ones that are gone before me, because they know me better. I know my mother. I know my father. I know my grandparents, and I was lucky to meet some of my great-grandparents. And they know me better. They know me better than someone I was told, died some 2,000 odd years ago. And before you question my motives, I'm not asking you to believe what I believe. No, I'm not asking you to change, who you believe and pray to. All I'm going to ask is that you, specifically you as an African, ask yourself the same question. Because the more we do, the better it become for us, I think. The more we know, the better it will be for us. So, my friends, please subscribe and share and leave a comment. Would really appreciate it. I would really like to hear your comments, your feedback on this thought. And until next time, my friends, read a book. Read a book. Thank you.